Is Jungkook the new global face of masculinity? Or has the West gone too far with the comparison? What happens when Paris stops feeling familiar? When a single fashion moment forces Western media to ask an uncomfortable question? Are we witnessing the rise of a new global standard of masculinity? And does it have a Korean name? As Jungkook of BTS appeared across Paris-centered visuals for Elle Korea's January 2026 issue, the conversation shifted almost instantly. This was no longer just about a magazine cover. It was no longer just about Chanel beauty. Suddenly, Western outlets and fashion commentators were asking something far more provocative. Is Jungkook becoming the Timothée Chalamet of a new era? Or is that comparison already outdated the moment it's spoken? The question itself reveals a deeper tension. Comparisons are comforting. They make the unfamiliar feel manageable. They allow global audiences to translate a new kind of power into language they already understand. But what if Jungkook cannot be translated so easily? What if the very act of comparison exposes how much global culture has changed? The images that triggered this debate arrived quietly, yet their impact was explosive. On December 30th, 2025, Elle Korea unveiled Jungkook as the main cover star for its January 2026 issue, not once, but 9 times. Shot in Paris as part of an exclusive collaboration with Chanel Beauty, the project was immediately described as the moment everyone had been waiting for, a symbolic journey from Seoul to Paris. That phrase alone carried weight. It suggested arrival, evolution, and inevitability. High-end, the behind-the-scenes footage released on Instagram, Jungkook stands near a window overlooking Paris, dressed in a white shirt and black jacket that blur the line between casual and couture. His tattoos are visible, unapologetic, integrated into the look rather than hidden. The video lasts barely 25 seconds, styled like vintage film, overlaid with minimal text. Yet viewers around the world admitted the same thing. They forgot to breathe. Elle Korea's caption played into that reaction, half-jokingly asking who else was holding their breath while watching. The response was immediate. Millions of views. Exploding engagement. Hashtags like #JUNGKOKXCHANELBUTY and #JungkookSeoulKorea surged across countries within hours. Fans described him as ethereal, elegant, unreal. But amid the praise, something else began to surface, especially in Western commentary. The name Timothée Chalamet started appearing, at first. It seemed harmless, even flattering. Chalamet has long been positioned as a symbol of modern Western masculinity, celebrated for his androgynous elegance, emotional openness, and rejection of rigid masculine stereotypes. Jungkook's Paris visuals appeared to echo similar qualities. Softness paired with confidence. Vulnerability paired with control. A refusal to perform masculinity as dominance. But the more the comparison circulated, the more it revealed its limitations. Was Jungkook being compared to Chalamet because they share an aesthetic, or because Western discourse still struggles to discuss global icons without anchoring them to Western reference points? Is this comparison a bridge or a boundary? Jungkook's relationship with luxury fashion did not begin in Paris, and it certainly did not begin with Western validation. As a global ambassador for Chanel Beauty, he has spent the past year building a deliberate, strategic presence within the French luxury house. This was not a sudden pivot. It was a long-term alignment. Chanel did not choose Jungkook because he resembled a Hollywood actor. They chose him because he commands global attention without dilution. The Paris shoot represented a culmination of that relationship. Everything about it was controlled, intentional, and restrained. There was no excess, no shock value. And that restraint is precisely what unsettled expectations. Jungkook did not arrive in Paris to imitate Western fashion icons. He arrived as himself, and that difference mattered. Timothée Chalamet represents a shift within Hollywood's internal evolution. Jungkook represents something larger. He comes from a global pop phenomenon that has already dismantled old assumptions about language, fandom, and cultural dominance. BTS did not ask permission to lead global charts, and Jungkook does not ask permission to exist in elite fashion spaces. This distinction is crucial. Chalamet's masculinity is often discussed as a rebellion against traditional Western norms. Jungkook's masculinity exists outside those norms entirely. It is not reacting. It is redefining. Fans recognize this immediately. On social media, International Army did not frame Jungkook as becoming more Western. They framed him as becoming more himself. The pride was unmistakable. Pride that a Korean artist could stand at the center of Parisian luxury culture without compromise, without translation, without erasure. This is where the conversation shifts from fashion to power. Masculinity has always been a cultural export. For decades, Western media projected a narrow image of male strength onto the world. Recently, that image has softened, expanded, fractured. Figures like Chalamet symbolize that change from within. Jungkook symbolizes something even more disruptive, that the center of influence has moved. Korea's description of the shoot as a journey from Seoul to Paris was more than poetic. It was political. It acknowledged movement, not assimilation. Jungkook did not cross borders to fit into an existing mold. He crossed them to prove that the mold itself no longer holds. The debate over whether Western media has gone too far misses the deeper point. The real question is not whether Jungkook resembles Timothée Chalamet. The real question is why Western discourse still feels the need to frame global icons through Western lenses. When Jungkook stands in Paris, he is not following a path laid by Hollywood. He is walking alongside it, sometimes ahead of it, and sometimes rendering comparison unnecessary. Anticipation builds for Jungkook's plans in 2026, including long-awaited developments involving BTS. His fashion presence can no longer be dismissed as a side narrative. It is an extension of his artistry, a language he speaks fluently, one that communicates strength without aggression and elegance without rigidity. Perhaps the most revealing detail is how audiences reacted instinctively, not with analysis, not with theory, but with silence, held breath, and awe. That response cannot be manufactured. It signals recognition. Is Jungkook redefining global masculinity? Or is he simply exposing how fragile and outdated old definitions have become? His Paris moment offered no manifesto, no speech, no explanation. It offered an image, a presence, and a question powerful enough to echo across continents. And maybe that is why the comparison feels both inevitable and insufficient. Jungkook does not need to be the next Timothée Chalamet. He is something else entirely. A global figure standing at the intersection of music, fashion, and identity, quietly proving that masculinity is no longer inherited by geography, but shaped by authenticity. The world watched. The conversation ignited. And whether Western media is ready or not, one truth has become impossible to ignore. Jungkook is no longer entering the global stage. He is redefining it. The reaction did not fade after the first wave of headlines. Instead, it deepened. As more behind-the-scenes clips circulated and as international media revisited the Paris shoot frame by frame, the tone of the discussion subtly changed. What began as surface-level admiration evolved into something closer to analysis, even introspection. Western fashion editors started asking not just who Jungkook looked like, but why his presence felt so disruptive, so quietly commanding, so difficult to categorize, because disruption does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives dressed in a white shirt, standing still by a window, refusing to explain itself. What made Jungkook's Paris moment particularly powerful was its absence of performance. There was no exaggerated masculinity, no forced softness, no theatrical rebellion against tradition. He did not attempt to shock the industry. He simply occupied space with a level of ease that suggested belonging without assimilation. That distinction matters. Fashion has long welcomed outsiders, but only on its own terms. Jungkook did not arrive asking to be welcomed. He arrived already global, already validated, already followed by millions who did not need Western approval to recognize his significance. This is where the comparison to Timothée Chalamet begins to fracture. Chalamet's fashion narrative is inseparable from red carpets, film premieres, and Hollywood's machinery. His androgyny is often framed as brave within a system that still struggles with gender expression. Jungkook's androgyny, by contrast, is not framed as bravery. It is framed as natural. That difference changes everything. Jungkook's image does not ask Western audiences to expand their definitions of masculinity out of generosity or progressiveness. It forces expansion through relevance. He exists at the center of a global fandom that transcends language, race, and geography. When he appears in Paris, he brings that world with him. The industry must respond, not the other way around. This reality unsettles old hierarchies. For decades, Western media positioned itself as the gatekeeper of global cool. But Jungkook's L Korea covers did not need Western validation to go viral. They did not need Hollywood intermediaries to be understood. They circulated because they resonated. And resonance is power. The production details of the shoot further reinforce this shift. Directed by Lee Eun-hae with cinematography by Jungkook, the visuals carried a distinctly Korean sensibility even while set against Parisian backdrops. The vintage film aesthetic, the restrained pacing, the emphasis on mood over spectacle all reflected a storytelling approach familiar to global fans of Korean pop culture. This was not Paris consuming Jungkook. It was Jungkook reframing Paris. As fans noticed these nuances, so did critics. Some Western commentators began acknowledging that the comparison to Chalamet might say more about Western limitations than Jungkook's identity. Why, they asked, must a Korean global icon be explained through a Western figure at all? Why can't Jungkook be the reference point? That question strikes at the heart of the debate. Global masculinity is no longer shaped by a single cultural center. It is negotiated across platforms, fandoms, and industries in real time. Jungkook's presence accelerates that negotiation. His tattoos, once considered controversial in idol culture, now appear seamlessly integrated into luxury fashion narratives. His softness, once dismissed as manufactured, now reads as confidence. His silence, once interpreted as restraint, now feels authoritative. Even the fan response revealed something deeper. The emotional language used by ARMY was not defensive. It was assured. They did not argue that Jungkook deserved comparison. They suggested that comparison was unnecessary. That confidence reflects a shift in how global audiences understand cultural legitimacy. Validation no longer flows in one direction. As the January 2026 issue of Elle Korea prepared for release, anticipation intensified not because of novelty, but because of symbolism. The magazine became a timestamp, a marker of when a Korean artist's fashion influence crossed into a space once considered untouchable without losing identity. Elle Korea's decision to send Jungkook a custom box containing the special edition was not just promotional. It was ceremonial, an acknowledgement of contribution, not just collaboration. Speculation naturally followed. What does this mean for Jungkook's future? For BTS? For global fashion campaigns? For the next generation of artists watching this unfold? Questions multiplied, and that uncertainty fueled the story's momentum. Jungkook did not announce anything. He did not tease a manifesto. He let the images speak, and the images refused to stay silent. Perhaps that is why Western media keeps returning to the comparison. Comparisons offer closure. They suggest understanding. But Jungkook's influence resists closure. It remains open-ended, unresolved, and evolving. He is not the end point of a trend. He is part of a broader movement in which Asian artists are no longer emerging, but arriving fully formed. When Western headlines ask whether the comparison to Timothée Chalamet makes sense, they may be asking the wrong question. The more revealing question is this: what happens when global masculinity no longer needs Western mirrors to recognize itself? Jungkook's Paris moment did not announce a revolution. It revealed one already in progress. Quiet, elegant, and impossible to ignore. And as the world looks ahead to 2026, one thing becomes increasingly clear. This conversation will not end with a comparison. It will end with a redefinition, because history rarely announces itself loudly. Sometimes, it simply stands by a window, lets the light in, and waits for the world to catch up. And the world is still catching up. What followed after Paris was not a cool down, but a widening ripple. Discussions moved beyond fashion pages and fan spaces into cultural columns, marketing analysis, and even academic-style commentary on identity and globalization. Jungkook's image, once discussed primarily in the context of music charts and performance skill, was now being examined as a cultural signal. Not a trend, not a moment, but a marker of where global influence is heading. What unsettled many observers was not how Jungkook looked, but how effortless everything appeared. Effortlessness is dangerous in industries built on hierarchy. It challenges the assumption that access must be earned through conformity. Jungkook did not adjust himself to Paris. Paris adjusted its gaze to him. This is where the idea of androgyny becomes more than an aesthetic choice. In Western fashion history, androgyny has often been framed as rebellion, a conscious push against rigid gender expectations. On Jungkook, it reads differently. It feels integrated rather than oppositional. His elegance does not argue with masculinity. It expands it. And that expansion feels less like a performance and more like a lived truth.